1999, General Motors signed off on an internal memo concluding that the EV1 electric car was technologically viable, and quietly ordered its own engineers to stop improving it. Within 4 years, every single one of those cars was crushed, over 1,000 of them, and the man who signed the kill order walked away with a $20 million severance package. So why has no one ever told you about the memo? GM in the 1990s was America's car company, the largest automaker on Earth, employing hundreds of thousands of workers, shaping the economy of an entire region. And in 1996, they launched something that was supposed to define the next century, the EV1, the world's first mass-produced electric vehicle from a major manufacturer. Sleek, silent, shockingly fast. Engineers who drove it said it felt like the future. The press called it revolutionary. GM called it a commitment to clean energy. They were lying. Here's what was actually happening behind the press releases. California had passed a law in 1990 called the Zero Emission Vehicle Mandate. It required that by 2003, 2% of every automaker's California fleet had to produce zero emissions. GM didn't build the EV1 because they believed in it. They built it because a government forced them to, and they never planned to sell it, not once. The EV1 was lease only. You couldn't buy one. GM retained ownership of every single car. That wasn't a business model. That was a leash. The moment GM sensed the mandate might get weakened, they started pulling. CEO Rick Wagoner, alongside executives at Ford and Chrysler, began quietly funding a lobbying campaign against the very law that had made them build a clean car. In 2000, the California Air Resources Board began receiving industry pressure. By 2001, the mandate was being dismantled from the inside. From within the offices of the companies it was supposed to regulate. Here's what they didn't want you to see happening at the same time. The oil industry was right there with them. ExxonMobil and major petroleum companies were co-plaintiffs in a lawsuit filed against California's mandate. A coalition of automakers and oil companies working in concert to kill a state law that would have ended their shared dependency. Two industries, one coordinated kill. And the people most affected, the drivers who had leased the EV1, who loved it, who begged GM not to take it back, were simply told no. Chelsea Sexton, a GM sales rep who sold the cars, watched customers plead not to have their vehicles repossessed. One driver offered $1.9 million in cash to buy his. GM said no, then crushed it anyway. By 2003, GM had begun the systematic repossession of every EV1 on the road. Cars were taken to a facility in Burbank, then transported to a desert lot in Arizona, and crushed. 1,117 electric vehicles built at a cost of over $1 billion in research and development destroyed, not resold, not repurposed. The few donated to museums had their drivetrains permanently disabled first, so they could never run again. GM made sure of that. Here's the number that should stop you cold. In 2003, the same year GM was grinding those cars into scrap, Tesla was founded. Elon Musk didn't create the electric car market. General Motors did. And then General Motors burned it down. But that's not even the part they really didn't want out. The EV1's battery technology at the time of destruction had already achieved a range of 140 miles on a single charge. Engineers inside GM had internal projections showing a second-generation vehicle could exceed 300 miles by 2010. Those documents were never released. The program didn't die because the technology failed. It died because the technology worked. A profitable GM selling electric cars was a problem for every oil company, every parts manufacturer, and every dealership that depended on internal combustion engines breaking down. The EV1 had almost no maintenance costs, no oil changes, fewer moving parts. It was a threat to an entire economic ecosystem built on selling you repairs you'd never need. Rick Wagoner retired in 2009, not because of the EV1, but because GM went bankrupt and needed a federal bailout of $49.5 billion in taxpayer money to survive. His severance was reported at over $20 million. No investigation into the EV1 destruction was ever launched. No congressional hearing asked why $1 billion in publicly beneficial technology was crushed in an Arizona parking lot. The California mandate was permanently gutted in 2003. The same year the last car disappeared. The record was simply closed. The lobbying coalition that killed the mandate went on to fight fuel efficiency standards, emissions targets, and EV infrastructure spending for the next 2 decades. No one was charged. No one testified. GM eventually launched the Chevy Volt in 2010. They want you to see that as progress. What they will never tell you is that we were supposed to already be 30 years ahead. 30 years of EV infrastructure, 30 years of reduced emissions, 30 years free from oil dependency, all of it taken off the table in a desert lot in Arizona, one crushed car at a time. The technology existed. The demand existed. The engineers existed. The only thing that didn't exist was the willingness to let it happen. Ask yourself who benefited from that delay. And then ask yourself whether anything has actually changed.